using technology and designing products to meet basic needs. And the last kind of then run through I want to do is talk about what exactly does that mean? What does it look like? This can all be me sitting up here and talking at you, but what does it look like when people actually use this approach and this philosophy to design products to help people meet basic needs? So this is where I get to a little bit more showing off of things. And talk first about some of these things I'll talk about are examples of CATAPULT's work and projects that we've worked directly on. And then I'm also going to talk about organizations that we're familiar with that have also done work of this sort that are products that I'm a fan of, because I haven't done work in every single one of these categories. And I'm going to go back to my initial kind of basic needs categories of health, sanitation, etc. So starting with the question of health, and this is a very easy transportable example that I wanted to bring, which is it's a scalpel. And we worked with an organization that is operating in India focused on maternal health. And they're delivering what they call a clean delivery birth kit, which is directly attempting to address the problem that women are delivering children in really unsanitary conditions. And as a result, there's a lot of infections going on, a lot of infections to both the mother and the newborn child. And so they're delivering these kits which contain everything that you would need for at least a somewhat sterile birth. Nothing like we'd have in the United States, but it's like a plastic sheet to lay on, some gloves, some soap, something to cut the umbilical cord. The client was using a typical stainless steel handle for their scalpel, but it was the most expensive component of the kit, which drove the price up and made it less accessible. Additionally, they wanted to focus on making it biodegradable, because in India things are so often just tossed out, or they were reusing things but not sterilizing them. So they was like, hey, this is a really fancy, expensive looking handle, I'm going to keep using it even though I'm not sterilizing it. So the idea would be, how can we create something that doesn't encourage reuse and that would be biodegradable and would be less expensive than what was originally existing? So this handle we came up with here is actually just made out of bamboo. A couple pieces of bamboo that fit together and sandwich and hold in place a scalpel blade for a single use application and cutting of the umbilical cord. This is like our very first rough prototype. We have, I don't know, a couple dozen of them that are currently in India being kind of passed around among health workers there to get their feedback before our client moves forward with developing them. Another health-related product we worked on was an electric mosquito trap. A client of ours had gained rights to this mosquito trap that was developed in Germany that uses like some sort of proprietary chemical that smells like human sweat. And you put this, I don't know what, sounds like it'd be horrible, but you take this synthetic sweat and you put it in this mosquito trap, and there's a fan and it attracts mosquitoes and then traps them. And our client wanted to kind of re-envision this for the developing world where people didn't have access to regular, reliable grid electricity. So we worked with them to pair it with an appropriate size solar panel. And then they're going around and putting these up in schools and health clinics and other places where there's a large congregation of people. And the focus of this is to decrease incidences of malaria. So if you can kind of clear an area of malaria-transmitting mosquitoes, then you can actually help protect the people in the area. I talked about sanitation earlier in a client that we had been working on, focused on sanitation issues in urban slums in India. And the issue is that a lot of people don't have toilets in their homes, and they have to go and use expensive pay toilets or just find a place out in the open to relieve themselves. And our client is thinking about, well, how can we deliver utilities to people in urban slums where the infrastructure doesn't currently exist? They don't have wires run, they don't have sewer systems run, and they're developing a system of getting kind of portable toilets in people's homes, collecting waste, turning that waste into, or putting it in a biodigester, generating electricity and fertilizer, and then taking batteries back to those people's homes. So now you're providing both sanitation and electricity. And we worked with them to kind of envision this whole system and the various components of how it's all working, and they're currently working on prototyping that in India this summer. Water is, of course, a very interesting one, and I was really stoked to see that the Ecology Center had this example here, which is called a hippo roller. It's actually in South Africa. We did a little bit of work with them a while back, but the idea being that if you're going to be transporting water, it would be really great if you could transport like a week's worth of water instead of carrying a 5-gallon bucket on your head like a couple of trips every day. So this thing holds, if I recall, it's like 90 liters or something like that. You fill up with water and then you roll it around. And so it's a really simple and kind of elegant solution for collecting water, and then you take it home and you can actually put it up on end and store water and keep your week's worth of water supply right at home. So that's a really slick way of decreasing the burden of water collection, so that kids and women now have something they can go to school or work, as opposed to spend all the time collecting water. Food. We've worked with a client that's operating in Nepal, focused on, as I mentioned earlier, food fortification and figuring out how to help people get the micronutrients that they need to stay healthy. What people do in a lot of these countries is they will actually grow their own grains and then take it to a local miller, and that local miller will then mill the grain and give them flour back that they can use to produce food that they eat. And so we've been working with an organization to develop what they call a dosifier, which doses small amounts of micronutrients into the grain as it's being milled, so that people can go to their local miller and, as they're milling their own local grains, get the micronutrients they need. Shelter. I have one organization we worked with a little bit was called Uber Shelter, and they're looking at issue of shelter in refugee camps, and the fact that so often temporary shelter ends up becoming permanent shelter. And so you'll always see these like UN tents that people were only supposed to live in for like a month, and they've been living in them for like 5 years. And it's like, that's a bit of a problem. So they've actually developed what this kind of really simple temporary housing unit that can be modular and can be added onto, and can actually really last the duration, so to speak. So the idea being that it comes in kind of like this really flat, packable, easily transportable box, and then you can like go and assemble this shelter that is temporary in the sense that you can put it up in half a day, but it can actually like be built upon and actually form the cornerstone of a relatively permanent dwelling. Information is a really interesting one as well. We actually share an office space with a group called Invenio, focused on internet and communications technology, and they go all around the world helping get schools and mostly schools and clinics online. And they use like a lot of kind of radio telemetry stuff of putting a dish on the top of a building, and it'll beam a internet communication 10 miles away to the nearest internet connection. So they're getting schools online, getting access to technology, and it's like way less expensive than trying to actually run fiber optic cable or telephone line across that distance. Mobility, I mentioned a handcart earlier. We worked with this group that's designing a handcart for farmers in Tanzania, and the idea being, okay, these people have never had a wheel, they're carrying everything on their heads or in their arms, but it would be really fantastic if they had the ability to actually move things around. Not only move water, like the hippo roller here, but say you want to actually like move things around your farm, or you want to carry produce to market. And we hear all these stories of people having to hire local help to move things around, but if you had a handcart, you could actually do all that yourself. And we worked with them to design a really low-cost, inexpensive handcart that's actually going to get made in China and packed flat, and then shipped to Tanzania, where the end user will actually be able to assemble themselves. And the idea is kind of like taking inspiration from IKEA and the way that you get some sort of like really well packaged device or product that you can assemble yourself. The last few that I wanted to talk about is education. That's like a key one. Is so like Invenio is working on that, and probably a lot of you have heard of the One Laptop Per Child project. That's kind of like one of the larger projects that have been done in the space, and it's actually one of those often debated projects. But the idea being, can we get really low-cost computers into the hands of kids? And in doing so, can you actually be able to be providing educational material in a much more efficient and lower-cost way? So it's like you can put like a child's whole entire education worth of books on that computer, and then they can do that, and then they can actually use those computers to gain some sort of computer literacy and connect to the internet and kind of get themselves somewhat integrated into the 21st century. And then energy. Energy is really interesting here and abroad, and there's a lot happening with it. And I wanted to bring this little example of a group called Barefoot Powers produced this. It's called the Firefly Light, and it's just a really small little LED lamp that is made for like sitting on a desk so kids can do their homework, and actually has like a peg so you can hang it on your wall and use it as a home lighting system. Ooh, stay on. Yes. So, no? Oh, well, anyway, it has a solar panel that goes with it. Apparently I haven't hooked it up recently enough. But the idea being that if you don't have electricity in your home, you can buy one of these devices, put a solar panel on your roof, and then use this to have reliable, regular electric light instead of having to rely on something like this. Another excellent example of a kind of innovation in the energy space is a group we're working with called Simpa Networks in India, and they have this really cool kind of pay-as-you-go solar home system they're designing, which is the idea being that, gosh, I can't really afford, the money to buy the whole solar system myself, but I really would like electric light. So they're going and they're installing the systems on people's homes where it's a solar panel and an electric light hanging in their room, and then instead of having to pay for the whole system, you pay just for the electricity you're using. So they actually have like a little keypad where you can enter in codes that represent a certain amount of electricity. And as you buy electricity, as you can afford it, you are slowly paying back the system until you've paid back the full value of the system, and then they turn the system on a permanent basis. So it's this way of working with people to come up with like creative financing, because that, again, as I talked earlier, people don't have access to financing a lot of the time. So it's a way of building that into the product. So that was a really quick kind of survey of all these different solutions and basic needs and all of that. And I guess when I'm talking about all of these products and approaches, what we're looking at is everything is designed, or at least what we're doing as an organization and what a lot of our kind of contemporaries are doing, are trying to design products that use technology to help meet people's basic needs, and to do it in a way that's good for the environment and that's supportive of the community that everyone's living in. And I think that to try and close the loop here with what's happening at the Ecology Center is when you're looking at using technology and you're using technology to meet your needs, we can think about customers and clients. And I think that it's really helpful to think of the environment as one of the customers and one of the users of a technology. So if you're designing something and I'm talking about like putting the human at the center, at the focus of everything, designing for that person, well, you can also put the environment in there with that person, because we are not separate from our environment. And to really consider not only what your personal needs are, but what are your environmental needs, and how can you consider those environmental needs as a component of the design process and how you're creating things. So I guess that when we're looking at meeting basic needs, realizing that technology is the way that we do it, and how can we creatively use technology in a way that really is supportive of all of us in our world to meet these basic needs in a really like compelling fashion that's accessible to everyone. And that's really the concern of CATAPULT, the organization I work for, and the work that we're doing in all of these products. And I'm just so happy to have had the opportunity to share all of this with you, and thank you for listening to me so patiently.